Hey, back with Ballads at Midnight. This is now part 4, and we will get back into it. Chapter 6, Lullabies and the Lost. Lullabies of the Lost. After staying up all night, exchanging bittersweet memories with a vampire, I should have been more than ready to fall into 100-year slumber. Yet I tossed and I turned for hours. My mind is often again filled with locusts, but instead of wielding questions, this time they whisper ideas. I stride out my chambers with a groan, breaking my hands through my haphazard bed hair. I sit harder than I intend to on the blasted writing desk, and I steadily began to write. I would write the truth, just as I did when I sang before the Queen and her court. I would write the truth about the vampire who's been banished to the abandoned estate. People need to know that this humanity is not as lost as they say. When I get out of here, people will know. My quill scrolls to a stop. When I get out of here, how many songs have I played for him now? On the lunar eclipse, I played my 10th song. Earlier tonight must have been my 13th. I still have a ways to go before I'm free, but I've made significant headway on my debt to him. No use thinking about it now. I still have time to decide what I want to do. I nod to myself and I bow my head as I continue writing. I wake slowly to a light pattering of rain outside, with my cheek pressed against the desk and drool seeping from the side of my lips. Blearily, I wipe my mouth and squint at the loose leaf paper in front of me. I had written only 2 legible verses before I was overtaken by exhaustion. The rest were either bittersweet scratched out or scarcely decipherable. I sigh, reaching up to scratch my head and promptly knock over the inkwell. Shit! I hiss out another string of curses as the ink spreads across the desk, drips off the side. Instinctively, I save the journal, end up sacrificing my meagre verse to the fast-spreading black pool. Ah, damn it! Damn it! What a waste! What is wrong with me lately? Lucius going to be so angry with me. Where's that damn cleaning cloth he always uses? I turn and fro and realise with growing dismay that he always seems to have it on hand. He must keep it on his person. But maybe he has a spare up in the rafters. Maybe he keeps multiple rags near his person. To be safe, I search through all the cabinet downstairs like a pillaging raccoon. Not a single rag turns up. Knowing that Lucius will be even angry if I use a blanket or, God forbid, a curtain to clean up the mess. It seems I have no choice but to venture upstairs. My hand traces familiar cracks and bumps to the cobblestone walls. The tactile map I've learned to use due to the abysmal lighting of the stairwell. There are no windows to light my path, and the torches must have burned themselves down to smouldering husks an eternity ago. As I climb, I try to plant my feet towards the edge of each step, not only to keep me balanced, but to reduce the chance of stepping on a groaning centre plank. As a gentle policy, I found it best to avoid making undue noise. I'm winded by the time I reach the highest point in the estate, and I brace myself by resting my palms on my knees. Who in heaven decided it was a good idea to build something with so many stairs? I want to give them a piece of my mind. I spend the next half hour carefully rifling through the attic. There's an annoying number of decorative boxes and trinkets up here, and not nearly enough cleaning rags. I jerk to a stop as I wrench open a jewellery box and see the contents within, realising with abrupt horror how my actions mirror the person who killed Lucius's artist, rifling through his things. I don't intend to steal anything. Lucius won't see me. I should still have another hour or 2 before he wakes up. But I take a slow breath, willing myself to calm down. Even if Lucius acts irrational sometimes, he never hesitates to forgive me. In some way, I've never hesitated to forgive him. I find myself fixated on a particular point within the open jewellery box. There's an oddly familiar sight there, a hint of a small engraved shape that tugs at my memory. Didn't notice it immediately because it's partially buried beneath strings of pearls and gemstones. I gently shift the valuables aside, allowing the subject of my focus to be laid bare. It's a chunky, ornate ring, quite gaudy, really, and not something I'd ever be seen wearing. I plucked the item off the box, peering at it in the dim darkness. There's no way. At the ring centre is an enormous opal stone which glitters like a rainbow of fire. Carved directly into the stone is a crest I recognise from the guardsmen's shields and from the banners according to the Queen's courtroom. Without thinking, I put the ring in my mouth and bite down on the shank. It's disgusting, yuck. But I could feel the marks from my teeth imprinted on the metal. The body of the ring is made of pure gold. An actual, genuine royal signet ring. Did a member of the crown barter for their freedom with this? Or maybe it was stolen and then traded here by a thief? Because it can't be that... A scream cuts through the attic and threatens to burst my eardrums. I fumble and nearly drop the ring. I cram the ring back into the jewelry box, slamming it shut before whirling around. The noise definitely came from the coffin. Lucius? As I call out, I met with another scream, even more frantic and agonising than the first. The wooden box is tremoring hard enough that I worry it may topple over. I approach the noise. Every bone in my body shrieks for me to stay away, but my tremendous concern for him overwhelms every ounce of fear I have. The coffin is carved from blackthorn wood with small divot imperfections chipped off the edges. It's definitely fallen over before. I rap my knuckles against the wood, no differently than I'd knock on a bedroom door. Lucius, can you hear me? The coffin lid thuds as if in response. It continues to thud over and over as Lucius pounds his fists against the inside surface. Let me out! His roar is followed by the terrible, desperate noise of nails clawing against the wood. Lucius, it's me. It's Flame. Are you hurt? Stop this at once. I beg you. Release me. I command you to release me this instant. Okay, let's let you out. The fact that it's not yet sundown makes me uneasy, but Lucius is clearly in distress. Even if he comes out early, he can stay in the shade. I hesitantly run my hands along the side of the coffin lid and pull. It doesn't budge, as if it's been nailed shut. I try to wrench it open from the opposite side. The coffin continues to hold fast as Lucius screams and thrashes in its confines. The coffin rocks in place. Its corners strike my torso as I maneuver around it, knocking the air from my lungs. Ah, Lucius, stop struggling. Please, why are you doing this to me? What have I done wrong? I'm trying to get you out. There's something wrong with this thing. It's jammed. I have done everything you asked. Everything I withdraw my hand with a sharp recognition of his plight. Lucius doesn't talk to me, even if his screams sound halfway coherent. Lucius, are you awake? He responds only with racked sobs and a final weak thud. The source of the noise will not hurt you. He was certain, so quick to assure me of my safety. I sigh through my nostrils, press my forehead against the lid. I'm here for you, all right, even if you can't hear me. I sunk fully against the coffin, sliding against it with my hands curled into fists. I'll be here for as long as you need me. I'm here. Hours pass and continues speaking to him softly even when he seems to be addressing someone else, and I hold the coffin steady, maintaining my arms when it threatens to tumble onto its side. Sweat drips down my brow to my cheek, both from physical exhaustion and the emotional turmoil. But I don't want to abandon him. He doesn't have anybody else. After an excruciating amount of time, he answers me with more notable coherence. His voice is gravelly and hoarse, and discernibly calmer compared to the earlier bellowing screams. Flame, are you still there? Yes. The sun has gone down, hasn't it? Yes, at last. Lucius makes a small curt noise of acknowledgement before he clears his throat. With a hollow wooden groan, the lid of the coffin begins to give way. Through the slither of an opening, I catch a glimpse of a torn velvet bedding and deep gouges in the wood. The lid hangs aloof, barely ajar when Lucius's long fingers curl around the frame. He pushes it with visible effort, getting it just open enough to squeeze himself through. I scurry backwards to make room for as Lucius staggers out, shoulders slumped and steps uneven. The coffin slams shut behind him, ghastly sight that reminds me too much of a closing mouth. Lucius raises his chin briefly, staring down at me with darting, disbelieving eyes before he sags to the ground. I rush to his side, propping his back against the coffin. I'm sure it's the last thing he wants to touch, but it's the nearest solid surface. Lucius heaves a great, dejected sigh as he lolls back against the lid. It can't be opened till the sun is gone. Curses are obnoxiously specific, airtight, much like the coffin itself. Though there are times I've woken up spilled out of the damn thing because it rolled onto its side. Though he's panting and barely catching his breath, he can't keep his absurd commentary to himself. I should thank you for keeping it steady tonight, I presume. You are ridiculous. You go through this every single night. Are you hurt? It feels like just yesterday when you were suggested I'd be amputated at the elbow and then miraculously healed from it with my mighty vampire powers. He chuckles to himself as if recalling a fond memory. Then he hangs his head between his knees. Without thinking twice, I reach out to rub wide, slow circles around his back. An intrusive fraction of my mind notices his body is warmer than I expected. Take your time. It bothers me that you're deflecting with humour, but we're a pair of pots and kettles, I suppose. But the pot could have capsized on the opportunity to stab the kettle through the coffin. My hand slows, resting on his shoulder blade. Is that a request? No, don't answer that. I wasn't going to. Didn't even occur to me, Lucius. If I wanted to stab you, I would have done it weeks ago. How many times have you been stabbed? Before he can answer, I turn to look at the coffin with new eyes. An insurmountable amount of thin, discoloured lines streak across the surface, practically around the head and the middle of the box. I thought they were wood veins at first, but as I leaned closer, I realised they were incisions. Slits that had been filled and stained. Some of them have the approximate width of a longsword. Lucius, this is absurdly horrific. This is no way for anyone to live. You don't deserve this. You're too kind, Flame. A beat passes as he continues to breathe haggardly, still getting his bearings. Have you gotten any rest? He doesn't look up at me. He might not have the strength to do so. Have you? Touché, but I was technically asleep. Perhaps half asleep for some of it, but by and large I was unconscious. I know. Gradually his eyes rise to meet mine. How would you know such a thing? My breath catches when faced with our sudden proximity. I retract my arm from his back, though I will myself to stay by his side. It's just, we normally keep such a civil distance from each other. I've never even sat next to him until tonight. When I perform my songs for him, I'm the act and he's my audience. There's an invisible wall that separates us based on our differing status, the entertainer and the entertained. Here and now I feel as though the wall has begun to crumble. You must think I'm a terrible housemate for screaming all day. No, not at all. Sorry, I'm tired. I bump my shoulder against his. My fingers fidget and lace together in my lap, as absentmindedly little distraction that provides me a small measure of comfort. I remember what it was like. I used to get night terrors when I was a girl. Did you now? At the orphanage, Nightingale Gardens. Yeah, and it was the worst place to get night terrors. Half the matrons thought I was possessed, the other thought I was being intentionally, maliciously disobedient. Yes, I can imagine. It was usually some recurring nightmares about rats too, which was the worst. I still get them sometimes. If you don't mind me asking, what do you dream about? Do you remember? I don't know that I'd call it a dream. It's more akin to reliving a memory. The memory of when I was first exiled here. He taps the surface of the coffin with the back of his knuckles. My surroundings in there look roughly the same no matter the time period. I'm sure it contributes to my confusion. I've become convinced that this... Lucius looks at me, his eyes full of meaning that I can't quite decipher. This is a dream, and the inside of the coffin is my reality. Is there anything I can do? Can I get you something? Where do you keep your wine? I lift a stand, but Lucius catches my hand before I'm fully upright. Stay. He blinks rapidly and then drops his gaze to the front as if he's uncertain and surprised at himself, but he does not let go. He had his hand around mine is gentle and apprehensive. Please, stay seated. Stay with me a while longer. Acquiescing without difficulty, I lower myself onto my knees. He seems to breathe more easily when I'm by his side. We stare out the expansive glass window for a time, content to be quiet together. Of course, Lucius doesn't like to remain quiet for long. You know, I may feel better if you regale me with more miserable tales from your childhood. I wrinkle my nose at him and whack his shoulder with the back of my hand. He flinches, but I can feel his body quaking with quiet laughter. I'm serious. You mentioned something about rats. Why would they plague your dreams so? I'm afraid of them. They seem to have taken it upon themselves to haunt me. Although this estate has been marvellously rat-free. Yes, they'd have to try quite hard to cross the moat. Is there a story behind this fear of yours? Did you lose your parents to a drove of rats? I don't remember enough of my infantry to say either way. My earliest memories were in Nightingale Gardens. Although, there was this one time. I cut myself off with a snicker which makes Lucius tilt his head at me with a wry, curious smile. Wordless requests me to finish my thought. Forgive me, it's just the stupidest thing. There was a time when food was going missing from the kitchens. The matrons gathered us up and announced that we had a rat infestation. I was upset by this news, to say the least. I nearly stopped eating, worried I'd find hair or a whisker in my meal, or worse. I shudder for comical effect. When Lucius pats my hand encouragingly, I shoot him a small, grateful smile. It was just so frightened whenever I saw those beady little eyes or that flick of a tail into a crevice. It haunted every moment of my little life, day and night. I'm fairly sure that's when the nightmares began. I waked the whole orphanage just shrieking, and apparently I'd lashed out at the matrons while swinging fists. But I wasn't awake, not really. I'd remember some of my outbursts, but I couldn't tell what was real. They talked about getting rid of me then. It was even more terrifying and confusing than the night terrors. They discussed my fate right in front of me like I wasn't even there. Lucius doesn't say anything, but he watches me with furrowed brows. Are you sure my miserable childhood tales are making you feel better, Lucius? No, but tell me anyway. What made your night terrors go away? Ah, that's the stupid part of the story. I didn't know Ophelia very well back then. I knew she was the picture-perfect angel of Nightingale Gardens, and I knew she was beautiful, but I was much too shy to speak to her until one day. She yanked me by the arm and pulled me aside, dragged me all the way to the cellar where we couldn't be seen, couldn't be overheard. Of course, this was very upsetting for me as well. Cellars are notoriously full of rats. She shut me fiercely, eyes ablaze, and shook me so hard I was nearly dizzy. Stop screaming every night, she said. There are no rats in the kitchen. I just sobbed and wailed in her arms. I didn't believe her and I didn't like getting yelled at. I mean, how could she try to lie to me like that, right? It wasn't unreasonable for me to be afraid. I was just a little girl. God, she was so frustrated with me. She groaned through gritted teeth and insisted there were absolutely no rats. And that's when she told me. She made it all up. The rats? The entire infestation. She made it up. She was lying to the entire orphanage about it. Why in heaven would she do such a thing? To see if she could get away with it. Isn't that awful? She was stealing extra helpings of food for herself and then planted false evidence, rat droppings of fur to ensure her lie held water. Each day she'd tell the matrons that she was going to go into town to find a cat, so the cat could eat the rats. But she never actually looked for one. She just went out and had her fun in town, then came home with one of those apologetic doe eyes. They made everyone melt for her. Anyway, Ophelia showed me where she kept her spoils, and she said she would share with me as long as I kept my mouth shut. I had to not only stop screaming, but I also had to keep a grubby little secret. Her reputation was spotless after all. Revealing her mischief would damage her chances of becoming queen. I was offended at first. I suffered so many nightmares because of her, but then I was intrigued. I promised I would keep quiet, but from that moment on, I saw her in a new light. I watched her like a hawk and followed her like a shadow, curious what other lies she'd been spreading. But the night terrors didn't stop, not right away. I guess Ophelia became fond of me at some point because she'd sneak into my room to sing softly to me every night. Every single night, even when my nightmares were gone for good. I don't think I can ever forget that lullaby. May I hear it, Flame? The knot in the pit of my stomach returns, twisted and aching. No, I can't. From the corner of my eye, I notice a blotch of ink on my lap. I rub at it, absentmindedly smudging it with my thumb. I'm sorry, it's just... No need to explain, I understand. No, you don't. When I confronted her in her throne room... God, I wasn't planning to be treasonous, you know. I spent months writing a beautiful song for her, but when I saw her, I knew it was forbidden for the crowd to see anyone from her previous life. I knew that, so I hid who I was. I used a false name and pretended it was my first time setting foot in Illuvian soil. All I wanted was to see her again. I would have been satisfied if I could see her one last time, if I could see that all those terrible rumours were all wrong. My eyes sting. I wipe at them with my wrist. But she... Whoever was sitting on that throne, it was not my Ophelia. It couldn't have been her. Whoever it was, she had her face, but she didn't have her eyes. Not the eyes I knew. These eyes were hungry yet full of disdain, watching me like I was some sort of worm under her heel. And she had this ridiculous harem that was dancing around her, and every so often she called one of them to come sit in her lap and kiss her in front of everyone. It didn't make sense. Ophelia didn't like anybody. Just to make sure, I started making small talk. Something to introduce the song. I asked if there were any rats in the royal kitchen. And she just scoffed at me and told me it was a repulsive thing to suggest. She told me to be silent and that she didn't want to hear another word unless I was going to play my song. My lips quivered and my voice began to break. So I changed the song. I had to convey how I truly felt. Lucius throws his arms around me, then, holding me tight, I bawl against his chest, losing every last ounce of my composure. Forgive me, Flame. I should never ask you about this. She told me she wanted to make things better for everyone. She told me she'd write. She didn't write. Why didn't she ever write? Forgive me.